If you lived in Indianapolis during the 1990s, hard to not hear or see this guy at least once a day. When you consider he was on Bob and Tom in the mornings, fast forward to the afternoons, he's doing Mark Patrick on sports on 1260 WNDE, and that's just on the radio side. On the TV side, he was sports director at Wish TV. We welcome Mark Patrick to the show. Mark, good to talk to you, buddy.
Jimmy.
How are you during all this?
Oh, my life really hasn't changed.
I was gonna say with retirement, it couldn't have changed all that much.
No,
Yeah.
and I like just sitting around at the house anyway. I say sitting around. I'm
Yeah.
always doing something, but I like being around my house anyway. So it hasn't really affected me much. I feel for those that have, though. It's a really bizarre time.
Have you picked up any new hobbies in the downtime?
No, I already had a bunch,
Yeah.
So
What do you typically like to do in your off time?
I do a lot of home improvement stuff, and I make a lot of I do a lot of woodworking projects. I've made in the last year. I've made bunk beds for my grandsons.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, and play some golf. So I keep plenty busy.
You live in South Carolina now, is that right?
Yeah, I'm 100 yards from North Carolina.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, we're right in the border in the mountains. So it's pretty beautiful here.
Well, and a lot better weather than Indiana. I gotta tell you, I've lived here 25 years now, and I think I might have met my limit with Indiana weather. So.
Gosh, already at the ripe old age of 25, Jim. I hope you'll be okay.
Yeah, you just got to keep pushing through. I think that's what people in the Midwest usually do anyway. But, with the pandemic going on, I bet it was a relief to you to be retired, to not be associated with the station, and have to report on sports when no sports are being played.
Yeah, that would be that would be tough. The thing that I'm finding really awkward about the whole deal regarding sports is figuring out what time of year it is.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, okay, NBA, what? Hockey, what? Isn't it August? Oh, yeah. It's very, very weird. And then it's like the Colts. It was like when the Colts went to training camp, you knew fall was around the corner. It was a very decisive time of year, and now it's kind of like in secret, so it just, the whole thing is very weird.
Looking toward your professional career as a broadcaster, your dad was an accountant growing up. Did you feel a need to kind of pursue a career where you were doing something new and creative as opposed to something repetitive like accounting day to day?
Yeah, he was a tax guy, and so when I first got out of college, I would work there, nights and weekends doing tax returns during tax season. And like any of the jobs that I had in high school and college, that convinced me I needed to find something to do that didn't involve work for a living.
Yeah.
Because, God bless him, and my brother, basically bought the business from my dad. So, I think my dad would have really enjoyed it if I had somehow worked with him in that, but there was just no way. It's like I was not cut out for that.
Your first major gig, though, that you got to land in Indianapolis as far as relating to sports, though, was being the bat boy for the Indianapolis Indians. How did that work out?
Well, I was 14, Jimmy. I mean, you need to point that out. It's not like I was 30.
Oh, okay. There we go. We want to clarify. We want to clarify. A young Mark Patrick here. The timeline. There you go.
It was, that was fun. I mean, I thought I was king of the world to get to do that kind of stuff, and then all the guys I got to meet over the course of that.
Yeah.
Because I was the bat boy for the visiting team when I was 14. When I was 15, I was bat boy for the Indians, and then when I was 16, I started working in the clubhouse for a couple of years. So, basically 4 years at Busch Stadium, and that was during the run of the Big Red Machine when the Indians were their AAA team. So I got to meet an awful lot of people. Played played catch. I can remember playing catch with 5-year-old King Griffey Jr.
Oh, wow.
And that didn't. I thought I was doing him a favor, and as it turns out, that gave me a story for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and you do have the world's only grandchildren. Have they taken much of an interest in sports to this point?
So far, the newborn is 6 months old and showing a lot of interest.
Oh, great!
And then Drew's 3-year-old son, who will be 4 in October, is already playing golf and baseball, and he's got an indoor basketball facility that his grandpa built for him. And then on the other side, my daughter's son is 4, and I think he's going to be more of an outdoorsman.
Okay.
I'm going to try and push him into golf, but I shouldn't say push him, but, afford him that opportunity if he wants it. But I think he's just kind of he's a pretty free spirit so far.
Well, I don't blame you about the golf thing, because one of my favorite stories about growing up was when my parents were taking me to different doctors to figure out initially what would eventually be diagnosed as CP, and the first question out of Dad's mouth to the doctor that diagnosed us was, would he be able to play golf? So I get it from, being able to bond with your grandchildren and everything else. It's a great sport to do that. So
it is. And, the thing about golf is it stays with you your entire life. So if you have that skill, I grew up in Brownsburg. We didn't have any golf courses around. I played basketball, football, baseball all day. I mean, that's what we did. We got a neighborhood game, or we went to the park. We rode our bikes to the park. It was just, it was an idyllic time. We didn't know it was, but it was just great. And, the downside of that is I never discovered golf, never knew anything about it. It was really mysterious to me, never was around it. And then I was working so much during my career that I really, never had time to play. So now, I'm playing with guys who go, oh yeah, I've been playing since I was 4. Yeah, great. But I love it. I love it from the standpoint of, if I had it to do all over again, I would have kind of pushed Drew more in that direction, because you watch Colin Morikawa win the PGA championship yesterday. He won $2 million, and he cuts a check for his caddy. Okay, but that's all on him. He won all that because of him. He didn't win that because somebody made a great diving catch in the infield, or somebody stuck up a hand in the end zone and was able to pull a pass that was really overthrown down, or he didn't finish 5th because the shortstop booted a ball that should have been an easy play to end the inning. It was all on him, and that's why I really like the individual feel that golf has. If you want to be the greatest, there's really there's one way to do it, and that's to have the right mindset and to put the work ethic in.
Well, and the reason why I would like it, and why I always gravitated toward it if I became a professional athlete, you get to hang out at country clubs. It's a nice environment to hang out at, week to week.
Jimmy, you're always thinking about the social aspect of things, aren't you?
I like to make friends, Mark. That's what I do. That's what I do anymore. I'll tell you.
If you why did you do what your dad did? Be in a band. Have a band. Nothing brings you the chicks like that. You know that.
What instrument do you think I should go for? I think.
Did you never delve into the music side of things?
I played a little bit of piano.
Really? And that's it?
That's it, man. I didn't have the patience for it.
You were not destined to be an enchanter?
No, well, I was always like a ceremonial, member, but no, not part of the album cover at any point. No.
That really surprises me.
maybe down the line, and during the pandemic, that would have been enough time to, at least learn a few chords. I have several friends from the Bob and Tom show and folks that Dad played with that would allow for me to learn from them. So maybe down the line.
I'll tell you, one of the great eye openers of my life was when I went to Ball State. I started to say college, but I went to Ball State. Yeah. And, I sit there and my whole life, it's like, well, the chicks got to dig guys that play football, basketball, baseball,
Yeah.
Even though I found that really wasn't the case in high school. But, I go to Ball State, and so I'm thinking, hey, here we go, college. You'd heard all the stories.
Yeah.
And still didn't have the chicks great interest in the kid from Brownsburg. But I noticed these guys who I thought were kind of, they were certainly non-athletic, I'll put it that way. Boy, if they pulled out their guitar or if they sidled up to the piano and started playing,
yeah,
it was like a chick convention. They're all checking in at the front desk saying, yes, I'm here for the swooning convention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to watch this guy and just totally fall head over heels because he plays an instrument.
Mm.
So that was a real eye opener for me. I was like, well, hey, maybe I should have paid more attention when Mrs. Jackson was trying to teach me the piano.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Chooch landed Marie, so
that's right.
That's
the all-time winner.
Anyway, looking forward to. I listened to an interview with you and Mark Monteith, and you talked about getting Sports Illustrated for the first time. Was that kind of your first interest in sports media?
I don't. No, I think seeing the newspaper every day was probably. We actually got the old Indianapolis News when I was a kid.
Oh, that's right.
So it was the afternoon paper. So I can remember if I would get home from school, that would generally arrive, 4:30 or 5. And that was a great paper because, for that time, you didn't even know what the scores the night before had been.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to do that. I would read box scores. I would usually know what the Pacers had done because I'd listened to them on the radio. But it would be great to read the recap of the game and then look at the whole box score,
right.
To see how many points everybody had. And then baseball box scores, I would devour all of those. I love to look at the leaders, and so I think that that afternoon newspaper would probably be my first love of media, and then getting the Sports Illustrated subscription when I was 8, because it said 52 copies for 18 cents a piece. I'm like, hey, there's a don't pay for My dad had bought me a Sports Illustrated when we were on vacation at some hotel, and so I took that subscription card and sent it in. It's like, don't pay now, pay later. I'm like, okay, yeah. So my mom was really surprised when she had to pay later on that deal. But then I had that subscription basically for the rest of my life. And that was a different thing. That was a more in-depth look at guys. And then of course the color pictures were just fascinating. I mean, I loved seeing in color those Oakland A's uniforms,
mm-hmm.
the gold and green, and Reggie Jackson and those guys, seeing in those white shoes, it's like, man, those all pop. And there's something about major league uniforms, be it NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, when you see them in person, for some reason they're just cleaner and crisper and pop. The color just is like,
yep.
Wow, and we watch now on high definition televisions, and that helps, but nothing, pops like an in-person experience of seeing those colors.
Oh yeah, I can remember going to games with Dad and games with the Indianapolis Colts on the sideline. The most impressive athlete that I can remember coming across was Cam Newton. I mean, biggest guy I've ever seen in pads. And that jersey popped, man. I mean, you're right about that.
But isn't that amazing? One of the experiences that stays with me through my sports career was every year going to training camp for the Colts, be it in Anderson or Terre Haute, but standing on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And every year, it didn't matter. I had my breath taken away by the unbelievable speed and violence. And that was just training camp of those guys, of the package of an NFL player. And just seeing how the collisions are that of a car crash every time.
Mm-hmm.
Happening literally 10 feet from you. And it just seeing the speed of Eric Dickerson, coming around on a wide pitch and basically having one guy, usually a corner, to beat, and seeing the move that he might have that was so subtle yet so extraordinary that it just left the guy gasping,
Uh-huh.
and it just amazed me every time. And then that feel you would get, as you were saying, when you're on the sideline of a game,
Mm-hmm.
that din of the crowd. And I just can't really fathom them playing football without a crowd.
That would, yeah.
It's like, I don't know. You certainly wouldn't get the, you certainly don't have the need for the quarterback to really have to take a couple steps over toward each side of the field to get his message to the wide receivers if he's changing the play, huh?
Well, and I mean, you look at the NBA in the bubble; they have a 7-second delay in case someone does curse on the floor. You hear that pause to prepare for that. And also, they've talked about funneling in crowd noise from video games, and that was kind of my first exposure with sports media. Is playing those games and practicing calling my own PlayStation games.
Yeah, see, it's just it's a totally different world, really, with what you grew up with and what we grew up with. I mean, we thought it was cool to have a Stratomatic, which was the old baseball game where you rolled the dice to decide whether a guy hits a double, triple, strikes out, whatever. It's a roll of the dice.
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
Kind of take me through, because I went through all the different roles that you had in the city, in the media market. What did one of your days look like? It had to have been just busy from start to finish.
Yeah, the busiest days would be when would be in the 90s when I would do like on Fridays were really bad, because that was the day we would tape Who's Your Millionaire. So I would start generally get up about 5 or so, go into the Bob and Tom show, and I was doing stuff on there, and while I was doing that, I was also calling in bits on as many as 14 different stations at a time around the country.
Yeah.
So before Bob and Tom were syndicated, I was actually doing that around the country. And then I lost a lot of those stations when Bob and Tom became syndicated and went into those cities, because then I couldn't compete against them. So that would be until 10 or so, and then I would go home and change into a suit, and I would get to the lottery show about 11 for the stuff, and we would generally start taping about 11:30, 11:45 on a Friday, and then that would take an hour and a half, and then I would go into Channel 8, and that was a big day, because Fridays were high school football or high school basketball. So
Right.
I would generally go live from somewhere, and then that night, gather. It was pre-internet, so you would need to gather scores by people calling them in. So we would do that for most of the night, and then we had an extended show. We do about 15 minutes worth on Friday nights. And then so that day I'd get home about midnight. So those were long days. But it was all just fun stuff. And like I said, none of it felt like work. And I did that for quite a while. And you just get, the interesting thing about it is it would be everything had to be on a schedule. So I had it in my contract that I could go home from Channel 8 between the 5 and 6, and the 11 I could go home for dinner. So when I would go home for dinner, I would often play. I'd do something with Drew. Every
Right.
night we would play out in the yard, and my neighbors would always laugh at me because I'm out there in a shirt and tie, playing catch or rebounding or doing something, and then go back into Channel 8 at night. But you had to do everything on a schedule. It seems like I got so much more done then than I get done now. Because now it's like, I can do that. I can work out tomorrow. I can work out this afternoon. I don't need to do it right now.
Right.
But, boy, when I was on that schedule every day but Friday at 1 o'clock, it was like, okay, that's when I work out. Then I take a shower and go into Channel 8. So I just had everything really regimental, and that's how I think I got so much done.
Well, and something about millennials, I mean, it's me and a lot of my friends, we're always about work-life balance. I guess Wish TV having that clause in your contract so that you could go home and have dinner with your family, that kind of gave you some sense of work-life balance.
Yeah, and then, both Channel 8 and WNDE and Q95 were great about, if I said, hey, I got to go to the Final Four, for Channel 8, or hey, Bob and Tom are going to the Bahama trip. Can I have a couple days off? And everybody was always very respectful of my other responsibilities and worked with me on that. I mean, sometimes I'd have to take vacation days,
right?
But a lot of the times I would be able to work stuff out. And it was beneficial. Like I'd be covering the Final Four. It was beneficial for Bob and Tom because I was able to, call in from the Final Four and do reports. So, it was just things like that were always good.
And with all that you did, was there ever a gig that you turned down and looking back you wish you didn't?
I think, selfishly, there were things at ESPN that I didn't take that I kind of go, that would have been cool. But on the other hand, if I had done that, I 100% feel like my son wouldn't have played Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
And on my list of priorities, I really put that my family, and my daughter is a great success. She's a farm MD and head of pharmacy at a hospital in Asheville. Before that, she was chief of ICU pharmacy at Johns Hopkins. So I'm very, very proud of how they turned out, and I really. They first of all, my wife and their mom is a most unbelievable person and great teacher. So they learned so much from her, and I give them, certainly give their brains part of the equation to her. So they would have been great, I'm sure, but I don't think, especially with Drew and his success in sports, that would have ever gotten to the level it did had I not been around as much as I was.
Well, and, again, I have to point to my own experience. Dad was good enough to get a record deal to travel if he wanted to, but he wanted to stay here to be with my mom and me, and I'm a better person for it. And you should be proud of your family. It's unbelievable what you've been able to accomplish.
Well, and with your dad's passing, what's his legacy, right?
Yeah.
It's those things that you have. Those memories with him and everything I mean, a while ago you talked about going to the Colts game with him or an Indians game, and it's like, or Pacers game, and no, that's what you remember. You don't remember the gig he had at the Vogue on August 11th.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Exactly.
You remember that. And so if you get to late in life and you're fortunate enough to be able to look back,
yeah,
and I'm sure you're going through this too. Your dad's becoming a heck of a more great guy with every day that you get older.
Yeah,
because you're understanding what he did, and that's the rewarding part. The reward is in the end.
Well, and there's different priorities for everybody, but radio and television is a demanding career. What would be some pieces of advice for folks trying to pursue this career now?
Well, I think the one thing we're talking about is basically it. Having been around it for 40 years like I was, the people that get the really big success don't have both. They don't have that family and the very tip top of the career. And if you watched Michael Jordan's, if you watched The Last Dance, that's pretty indicative of, what it is. Is he the greatest basketball player of all time? Yeah, in a lot of people's mind. Is he the greatest dad of all time? Not so much.
Right.
And that's okay, but I really think if you decide you're going to balance it, that's what it is. It is balance. It's not, you're going to have to take away from one and add to the other to balance it. And which side you take away from is the one that's going to suffer a little bit, and you just have to be okay with that. You just have to be accepting. I mean, I really feel like I really optimized my career side as much as I could with what I knew I was going to make my family side.
Right.
So the guys I've seen who make it really big, I look at their kids and I go, they're just, they just aren't what they might have been, I guess. And obviously there's a lot more factors in that, but I learned early on that, I didn't understand, and especially when I was around your age, the early 20s, when I first out of school, it was like, I'd sit there and in my own mind, I'd watch people and I'd say, gosh, I've got more ability than that guy.
Right.
Why did he get that job? And it's like, oh, well, one, I didn't apply. I didn't try for it.
Uh-huh.
You have this thing that you think, oh, people are just going to notice me and like throw jobs and money at me. No, these people started getting early jobs and then succeeding subsequently because they had drive and ambition.
Right.
And because basically everybody has ability, some more than others, but it's the drive and ambition. So if you have a really extraordinary talent and you have drive, it's unstoppable. And I think drive is much more important. Larry Bird was not gifted with great athleticism by any means, but is there a better basketball player? Not in my mind. I would rather watch Larry Bird than any other player ever because of what he did without that incredible athleticism. Now, being 6'9" helped, but but still, the things he was able to do, and then even at the end of his career when he was playing with no back, it's like, wow. So I would just say that drive and ambition, and I don't know, is that an innate trait or is that something you develop?
Yeah.
But to me, And it's like what you're doing. You look at it. It's like, well, okay, I got done with school, and I didn't get that great job, or ESPN wasn't knocking at my door for whatever reason. Well, this just in, they don't knock on anybody's door. You knock on theirs, one. But you sit there and you go, okay, well, what can I do? Well, you're doing a podcast, which is that was like something that wasn't available when I was your age.
Right.
You had to do it commercially, or you couldn't do it at all. So, and then there are guys I know that have got Major League Baseball jobs and doing play-by-play. I'll ask them, well, how'd you get there? How'd you know? Well, they would just go on their own, many times buy a ticket, and go sit up in the upper reaches of a stadium and just do play-by-play. Have people hollering and making fun of them sitting around them, but they were doing it and getting better, so that when that opportunity did come, they were ready, and they were willing to go to a really small town in the South and do Class A baseball for a year or two and just get better. Learn their craft, do it, and now they're in the big leagues. But they all put in their time, and they had that ambition, they had that drive, and they didn't sit around and go, well, okay, I did Dodger games up in the reaches of Dodger Stadium for 2 years. I'm ready for the big leagues.
Right.
No, they were humble enough to do the necessary things to go ahead. It took more time, but they eventually got to their goal.
Well, and in the era of social media, I think a huge thing that I'm still having to deal with each episode that I do, I can't be afraid of making a mistake, because that's part of getting better. You can't be afraid of screwing up, because eventually you'll get to a point where you don't do it as much, or it won't be noticeable, at least to the listening audience.
You can't be afraid of the turnover.
Yeah.
If you're going to try for the great assist, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you look at the greatest assist guys of all time, it's pretty high turnover rates, because they were trying it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Larry Bird had his share of turnovers. Certainly Michael Jordan had his share of turnovers. Anybody. I mean, you don't ever think of John Stockton as being a high turnover guy. I'm just guessing that Stockton is probably among the the top 10 leaders in NBA of all time for turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just guessing. I have no idea, but it's because he's was such a great assist guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would have admittedly a very difficult time operating in the system we have now of instant feedback. Because, you want to do something, you do a podcast, you want the comments to go, great job, Jimmy. Oh, man, you're the man.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and it's like, boy, it would have been nice to hear blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Or, why are you doing a podcast? Yeah, they're negative.
Right.
And you might have one negative for the 10 positives, but you always look at the 10 positives as going, so shallow. Yeah, they're just, that's a friend of mine, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But that one, man, it just stays with you. And so you got to, you really, as hard as it is, you just can't pay attention to that stuff and do your thing and be yourself. You have to find who you are. It took me a long time to find my own voice, especially since I was doing other voices all the time.
Yeah.
You got to find your voice. And then I think no matter what you do for a living, I've told Drew this about pitching. And I've told him this numerous times in the last 4 or 5 years. So he's pitching in the big leagues. Why would he want it? He doesn't want advice from me. But only thing I do tell him is be yourself. Because, there's this pitching coach that wants to take credit for you making the big leagues. And there's this manager who wants to take credit for his handling of you, and that's why you're in the big leagues. and certainly coaches he had along the way take credit for it. No, you find out who you are, and it's, I can't tell you how many people I've heard through my career who take credit for Bob and Tom and who they are. Oh, well, I discovered Bob and Tom. No, you know what? You didn't. They were there when you arrived.
Yeah.
And I watched it firsthand. They became who they are because of what they did. And you talk about people that knew their voice and just were themselves. And it didn't matter. They took criticism when it wasn't a thing. Before social media, they were getting killed big time in the newspaper and on television, and they stayed the course. And that is probably the greatest example I can think of.
Yeah.
You find your voice, you stay with it, because then if something doesn't work, you know why it doesn't work. But if you do, like if I told you, hey Jimmy, start doing your podcast without your pants on.
Yeah.
And you go,
Yeah.
oh, okay. And then you do that and it tanks. You go, okay, well, did the podcast not work because of something I did, or was it because of Mark telling me to take my pants off? You don't know, right?
Yeah.
But if I tell you to do it without your pants on, you go, that's not me. So you don't do it.
Yeah.
And then whether it's good or bad, you know why it's good or bad, right?
Yeah. Well, and
you know, because of you were you didn't do. And I'm not saying don't take advice, but I've had so many bosses through the years, and especially like consultants come in from Miami and go. I had a consultant one time, his Channel 8, come in, and he goes, "Oh, you need to quit doing all this high school stuff." Yeah, people want to hear about the pro. The pro stuff is what everybody wants to hear about. I just shook my head and said, "Oh, okay, great." And then I started doing more, high school stuff, because I had seen it firsthand. When people would put a little 19-inch TV in the middle of a high school gym, and 3,000 people would come to watch the highlights together of an IHSAA football or basketball game after it had been played.
Right.
And they're waiting for a 22-second highlight package that we're going to run. And so I was like, man, this is Indiana. This isn't Miami.
Yeah.
No, nobody cares about high school basketball. But here, it couldn't be more large. So this is what, we're going to do. And I think to this day, that was a real turning point in how television sports guys, started doing more and more high school.
Well, I think that's true. Absolutely. I mean, when you consider, I was a producer at CBS Sports 1430 for a little while. And, what works for our content with that show would not work in Chicago or New York City. It's just you have to have an understanding of the people that you're talking to. And once you kind of understand that, you can kind of begin to build a little bit off of it.
Yeah, all you have to do in radio talk, if you have a slow day, is say Bob Knight.
Yes, that's all. That's it. Two
right.
Words. Two words will trigger.
You don't even have to give the phone number out.
No. No.
You can't get in.
Yeah.
For a phone call. Yeah. So, yeah, is that going to be, if you're in California, could you do that? No.
Well, we got to talk about your impressions too, because that's just one of my favorite things, and it was one of Dad's favorite things, getting to record Coach Potato with you when you were Don Fisher. You played that on that track. What would you say is your most requested impression when people see you and stop you?
Well, I know, and I'll just throw this in. Your dad loved playing on the Keith Jackson song too.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
That's what he would mention to me every time I saw him.
Yeah.
I don't know. Requests, I don't know. It kind of it's funny because it just depends on the crowd.
Sure.
If I'm at an IU game, then people would say do Coach Knight or do Don Fisher, and if I'm around baseball, I get a lot of Mark Schott or Harry Carey, and so it was always it was kind of like when if I was at a sporting event, people saw me as the Channel 8 guy. If I was at a gas station, people saw me as the lottery guy.
Yeah.
And everywhere else, Bob and Tom. So I could almost predict, like, from where I was, what kind of comments I would get from people.
Is there any desire to go back to media at this point?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's stressful. I got burned out myself, but I'm working my way back doing this podcast. So, really appreciate you taking some time to talk to me today, Mark.
Jimmy, I hope you do well. I appreciate it.